Carole Taylor. Well, 2024 was quite a year. Painful conflicts around the world, natural disasters of various kinds, and here in Canada, an economy that lags in so many ways: growth per capita, productivity, business investment. On today's Journal, we take a look at what has been holding us back. Chris Gardner is CEO-President of the 4,500-member ICBA, Independent Contractors and Business Associations, based in BC, and is an expert on labor and construction issues affecting our progress. He gets frustrated with some of our public policies that impede the ability to build what our community needs, whether it's affordable housing or the support of infrastructure that must go along with it. In fact, the ICBA has brought lawsuits against both the provincial and federal governments, trying to bring attention to policies they believe have negative consequences for our economy. I remember last spring when the Prime Minister, after another round of announcing dozens of housing initiatives, declared, "With these initiatives, we hope to build 400,000 homes annually." That's almost double our current rate of about 250,000 homes. And I thought, what? Like how? It's a nice idea, but where will we find the labor we need to double our building output? Where will we find the money that it takes to build affordable or rental properties that often depend on government support? And how do we improve the zoning and permitting process at the municipal level to make this happen? Chris Gardner joins me to look at some specific policies that will have to change if BC and Canada are going to move forward as an economic and fair country full of hope for our children and grandchildren. Back in a moment. And joining me is Chris Gardner of the ICBA. And Chris, you know, in the intro, I said, well, 2024 was quite a year. Yeah. And here we are at the beginning of 2025, and things are pretty upside down already.
Yeah, we're starting off with a bang. No question about that.
Yeah, we don't quite know how this explosion is going to work out. But it's interesting to me because you have spent so much time working with governments. I mean, that's a big part of your mandate, public policy, and how does it affect growth and business agenda of the economy. So what's your take just off the top with Trudeau not going to run again? What does this mean, do you think?
Well, it means that there's going to be an election in the spring. It's because what's going to happen is prorogued Parliament. They'll have a leadership race. There'll be a new leader, a new Prime Minister. And I think very quickly after that, they will call the Parliament back, probably a speech from the throne, and then a vote of confidence. And in all likelihood, the government falls. And so we're into a spring election. So I think that's good. We need an election, and we've been fairly clear at ICBA for the last number of years that we need change in Ottawa, given the economic and investment trajectory that we're on. By every single metric that you look at, we're in decline, and it's impacting our competitiveness. It's impacting jobs. It's impacting our ability to build the infrastructure that we need. It's impacting incomes. And workers and their families are having a tough time making ends meet. And all of that comes down to what we would say is a lack of leadership in government in Ottawa in terms of setting the stage for investment, jobs, and opportunity.
Lack of interest, I would say, and lack of experience. Yeah. You know, very seldom do we see experienced business people willing to get into politics and at least be able to be a voice at the table. Yep. And so they don't even much talk about growth or productivity anymore.
No, we don't talk about industry, commerce, trade, those essential things that drive our economy, create prosperity, create opportunities, help us build communities. And we talk about everything else. And somehow I think, you know, magically the government believes that everything will fall into place. It's not falling into place, it's falling out of place. And as a result, we're all starting to feel the consequences of it. And from our perspective at ICBA, where we're seeing it show up is in our inability to get major projects approved. And that's impacting our jobs, our investment, our ability to compete, to build the infrastructure that we need to get our products to market, to build pipelines. It's a long list of inability to compete against other jurisdictions. Because people, I think, forget sometimes that when businesses make investment decisions, they look at the world and say, well, we could invest in the United States, we could invest in Canada, or in Asia, markets in Asia. It could be, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, could be Europe, the UK, Scandinavia, and so they have choices. And the challenge is, by every single metric that you look at, Canada is lagging against every single major competitor. And when you look at the OECD economies, we now have the second weakest record of economic growth among the most advanced economies in the world. That's an embarrassing statistic for Canada and for Canadians. And it's going to show up in declining incomes, declining productivity, and an economy that's going to struggle over the next decade.
So let's look at some of these specific policies that are, in your opinion, incorrect policies or bad policies. And this one's a funny one to even talk about because it's the greenwashing.
Right.
It's been called the greenwashing bill, which is talking about how environmental initiatives are discussed in reports by companies, in their aspirations. From first glance, you'd say, well, that makes sense. You want to make sure that businesses are being truthful about what they're really doing from an environmental point of view and what is possible for them to do. But there's another side to this that I know you've now got a lawsuit going against the federal government.
So ICBA and we joined with the Alberta Enterprise Group to challenge the law that you're referring to as Bill C-59. And what that law basically says, it basically says to businesses, only to businesses, that if you're going to make claims about the environment or sustainability or energy, you need to meet a certain standard of truthfulness. Now, that standard has not in any way been agreed upon. The government is committed to setting up a tribunal. That tribunal will have a standard in terms of if you're going to make a claim about the use of energy in Canada in this market, whether it's LNG or oil or another type of energy, it's got to be based on some measure of truthfulness that the government will determine. So it really isn't an attack on free speech. Free speech rights are fundamental charter rights. And when we're going to have important discussions and debates around environmental policy, clean energy, our economy, investment, jobs, opportunity, we need to make sure that we have a free-flowing debate, that there's an exchange of ideas that is healthy and productive, not putting a gag on businesses to say, you can't say anything unless you meet certain standards and certain tests that are yet to be outlined. So that's having a chilling effect on the debate around energy, our energy future, and we don't think that's productive. Canadians have a right to hear all sides of an argument or debate, a policy discussion, free and unfettered, and then Canadians will make up their minds. They're smart, they're engaged on a lot of these issues, and that debate should be unfettered, and that's a cornerstone of our democracy. That's what we're fighting for.
So can you give me a specific example of something that a company would be afraid to say because they might get sued?
Well, it could be everything from saying, like, for example, on the discussion around LNG and the opportunity for LNG presents for certainly British Columbia and for Canada, and about how if we develop our LNG resource and use that opportunity to sell that product to countries in Asia, to help them transition off of coal and heavy oil, that is one of the best things that Canada can do to help in the clean energy transition. That we will reduce more emissions that way by pretty well everything else we can do in this country. Now, if you say that, and you cannot document that to a level that this government tribunal will establish, then you'll be subject to fines, significant fines, and potentially jail time. So it's a significant overreach by the government. and it limits the exchange of ideas, it limits the debate, and it's one-sided. It is only a standard that business has to meet. And the environmental critic of those businesses do not have to meet the same standard. They can say anything they want. So it's an overreach by government. It's an attack on free speech. It's unnecessary. But it's, again, we have, if you look at Canada's top 10 exports, by far the number one export for Canada is energy. Everything related to energy, whether that's exploration and refining and everything related to that oil and gas bucket. By far, that is our number one export. It's not even close. And so, but we have a government in Ottawa that is focused on doing everything it can to limit and shrink the impact of that industry. An industry that employs hundreds of thousands of Canadians, high-paying jobs. The source of our biggest source of innovation and productivity is Canada's energy sector. And for some reason, we've got Ottawa positioned as at war with one of the biggest sources of prosperity and wealth in Canada, and that's our energy sector.
So with Trudeau saying he's leaving, does that make any difference?
Well, I don't think it makes any. What will make a difference is a change in government in Ottawa, because I don't think that a new leader of the Liberal Party will take a position that's very much different than the position that Prime Minister Trudeau has taken for the last 9 years. I mean, everyone who would run internally has been supporting those positions.
We're going to continue this discussion, also some issues concerning public policy, municipal and provincial as well. Back in a moment. With public policies, politician brings them in, get a headline in the newspaper maybe for a day, and then we don't really go back to it or remember it or think about it again because we've got stuff to do in our lives, right? So one that has always disturbed me was the Community Benefits Agreement. And maybe, first of all, you can explain exactly what it is and how it's affected the building of whether it's housing or infrastructure.
So community benefit agreements were brought in, it's a provincial initiative that was implemented by then Premier John Horgan back in 2018. And basically what they say is, if the province, if Victoria designates that a project will be built under the Community Benefit Agreement framework, then that means that only contractors whose workforces are certified by a building trades union can work on that project. So let's step back and think about how many people in British Columbia work in construction. Roughly about 230, 40, 50,000 people woke up today and went to a job site. That number moves around a bit because we've got some big major industrial projects that are coming off, so it's probably closer to 230,000 people. Of those 230,000 men and women working in construction, only 15% are members of a building trades union. So 85% of the workers in construction in British Columbia are either non-union, members of an employee association, or could be certified by a non-building trades union, what we would call a progressive union. It could be CLAC, Canadian Iron and Steel Workers, All Nations United, a whole host of other unions. Those 85% of workers are frozen out of those projects. The government's basically saying that, for example, the Cowichan Hospital will only be built by 15% of construction workers in this province. They're the only ones who can work on the project. And so, well, why would government do that? Why would you, in an era when, if you think of the procurement model that government's been using to build hospitals and SkyTrain expansions and schools and roads and bridges, the model is broken. Every single project is over budget. Every single project is overdue. And this is happening over and over again. And we're not talking, a few $1 million here and there. We're talking billions of dollars. And we're talking years and sometimes decades beyond schedule. So look, we are paying a significant cost in terms of workers and contractors being denied the opportunity to work on these projects. Because really, our message is very simple. what the government should do is just open and fair procurement. No special deals, no special favors, just tender the project and let everybody have a fair shot at the work. But by doing it, by using the models they're using, we are getting, we're paying more and we're getting less. And think of the Massey Tunnel. By the time the Massey Tunnel is completed, assuming they go forward with this plan, this will be like a 3-decade project. And 3 decades of commuters having to go through one of the worst bottlenecks in Canada. First responders trying to fight through that at different times of the day when it's very, very difficult to do so. Businesses trying to move goods either throughout the province or to the United States. All of that is impacted. And we sort of can't get out of our own way and build things. So the community benefit agreement model sounds great, but we say it's offensive because you're basically excluding 85% of construction workers and contractors.
Any chance of it changing?
It would only change if there's a change in government. The current NDP government in Victoria is committed to this. The Cowichan Hospital started off as, when that was first proposed, it was going to be a $750 million new hospital on Vancouver Island. It's now getting close to $1.5 billion, nearly double. It's 2 to 3 years late. The Broadway subway corridor, it's been delayed at least a year. The Patella Bridge been delayed at least 2 years. The Langley SkyTrain expansion, they had barely announced the winning contractor team. And a year after that, they were just basically starting to clear the ground. They said, oh, well, the price has gone up from $4 billion to $6 billion. And they're not even into the project. So all of these projects are, there's something significantly wrong. And one of them is the tendering model. The CBA model is fundamentally flawed. It's unfair. And what the government should be doing in an era where we've got this, we're at about a $10 billion deficit. They should be looking for savings and opportunity to find ways to reduce government spending, not increase it. So open and fair tendering would be the way to do that. But there's other elements of the procurement model that are broken, and that is we've got a situation where we're relying too much on consulting teams, external consultants. So we don't have the expertise in-house. And having the expertise in-house within government, we've lost the ability, the knowledge, the expertise that comes with building projects over and over again.
And Chris, one of the things that everybody's talking about is we've got to build more. We've got to have more housing and infrastructure. I noticed that you have been talking with Metro Vancouver, the entity, about one of the issues that they're starting to think about, saying that developers have to pay the full cost of any infrastructure builds upfront. Is that even doable?
Well, the challenge we have with housing and housing supply is that we are in a housing crisis, and we've been talking about this for years. But governments aren't acting as if we're in the middle of a crisis. There's absolutely no coordination, no significant, meaningful coordination between Ottawa, Victoria, and City Hall on the important things that we need to do to get more supply onto the market. So if you think about 1972, we had about 21 million people in Canada. We built about 230,000 homes. 50 years later, 2022, 2023, we built the same number of homes, about 40,000 homes. We have not been able to move the needle on supply. Well, why is that? Disjointed policies. You've got the fees and the regulations, the red tape, the building code changes that just compound it. Like we just layer on a new regulation, a new policy, new code, a new cost. And so think about you mentioned Metro Vancouver. So Metro Vancouver mid last year, they basically passed a change to their development cost charge bylaw that will see development cost charges on condos, apartments, single family dwellings triple over the next 2 years. So that'll go from about $6,000 to $8,000 per unit to about $26,000 to $30,000 per unit over the next 2 years. Now, how is that going to help with affordability? And so what we're saying is that rather than, to your point about having developers, this is where the province and the federal government could actually make a difference. And that is, they should be helping take the burden off of local governments to fund all of the infrastructure that we need to build. And that's schools, hospital roads, all those community amenities, water, sewer. That's where the province and the federal government can really make a difference. Rather than running around and making announcement after announcement, spending billions of dollars on building, because the private, according to the Premier, the private sector's failed to build homes, so now the province is going to get into the business of building homes. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That is not going to help, and it's showing up in the numbers. They're not moving the needle on supply in the market. So we've got to take a different approach. We actually do have to treat this like it is a housing crisis, because we're not. There is absolutely no sense of urgency at any level of government to address the real challenges facing the supply of housing. And think about what's happened on the population side. In 2023, we added a city the size of Calgary to Canada, 1.3 million people. Last year, we did the same thing. So in the last years, we've had 2 cities the size of Calgary to Canada. And 98% of that growth has come from immigration.
Well, on that optimistic note, you'll have to come back, Chris, and we'll get into some of the other policies, but I think it's important to try and shed light on some of these issues that are causing problems, not helping solve. Back in a moment. In our very busy lives, it's hard to keep track of all of the changes in public policy at all the different levels of government, but these affect our lives. So one of the things we try to do on Journal is take a deeper look from time to time at these underlying policies and their often unintended consequences that may go unnoticed or underreported. Let us know your thoughts on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Carole Taylor.